try and explain what's going on?
Well, this has to do with when they evaluate this, they take into account the perception throughout the stadium. They take into account the number of people in a particular stand who are involved, and this is the conclusion they came to. I think this is a perfect case where you make too many laws that are too specific and you tie yourself up into knots. Nobody should go through what Moise Kean and Blaise Matuidi went through. They were clearly audible on television. And most importantly, if you didn't pick up or didn't deem that there was sufficient perception of what happened before the goal celebration, what happened after the goal celebration, what happened every time Matuidi and Kean touched the ball was pretty obvious to everybody. So I think this is another missed opportunity, and I think another embarrassment.
What's the reaction been in Italy, Gab? Because here it's just complete shock that this statement can come out and say the things that it has. What's the reaction been in Italy?
Well, the reaction is that Cagliari got away with it. There isn't necessarily scandal and outrage because a lot of people, bought the absurd Moise Kean kind of brought it upon himself line with his goal celebration. They linked it to him diving earlier in the game and whatever else. And I don't think you necessarily have the have the realization of what's going on here. There is definitely a problem with the law. There's a problem with bureaucrats who apply the law to the letter, and they feel that it's necessary right down to the actual percentage of people in a certain stand and whatnot. And others would point out that people have been punished for less. But clearly, this is not the right way to go about things. And clearly, they should look, I think, not just as the entity and how many people realized that at the time, but I think also at the damage that's been done in the way it's been reported, in the image, and really the follow-on that happens after these events.
The statement itself paints a picture, is it the Federation? Paints a picture that they and others are nothing more than an embarrassment to society. Forget football. They're an embarrassment to the world that we live in now. They're the arbiters of the game in that country, and they can't make a proper education on this.
But they don't care.
This clear incident. It's not. I've got no other words than to say they are a joke.
Gav, from an Italian standpoint, as an Italian and as a representative almost as Serie, it must be embarrassing for you personally. This must anger you, no?
Well, look, I'm Italian. I'm not a representative of Serie. Let me make that very clear. I am somebody who reports on the game and reports on what I see. And were this to happen anywhere, were it to happen in the Premier League, in the Bundesliga, on any league that I cover, my reaction would be the same. I look at the facts. I understand why it happened like this. That the judiciary would say, and it was the independent judiciary committee says, the way the laws are written, there have to be certain prerequisites, and these weren't met here, and that is our interpretation. And that's the way for the FA to pass the buck. And they point to the laws and the regulations, and they say that the regulations are as tough as they are anywhere. And on paper, when you read them, sure, they are. But this absurdity that you can go and you have to actually count the people there and base yourself on the perception elsewhere in the stadium is frankly absurd. And I think it's a real black eye for the Italian FA. And also, if I may add, it's also a black eye, I think, to Juventus. This is one of their players who was abused here. You didn't. It's kind of the thing came and went. Bonucci said what he said. They kind of dropped it right there, at least publicly speaking. They weren't out there calling for harsh punishments. It's obviously an embarrassment to Tommaso Giulini, the Cagliari president, who all he did was jump around saying, how he wasn't a racist and his team wasn't a racist and so on. which doesn't change the fact that somebody was racially abused in his stadium. And I think, this whole setup, this whole behavior is unacceptable. I think it goes beyond the Italian FA, who are very happy to pass the buck and kind of adopt a let us never speak of this again.
Meanwhile, a football story in Italy that grabbed the headlines as well today. De Rossi leaving Roma made the official announcement today. Of course, a lot of speculation that this would happen. Got a standing ovation from his teammates at the press conference, giving him a hug. Obviously, this is a man who has very much dedicated his career to Roma. You take a look at his stats during his time, has been a key part of the success. A second most all-time appearances for the club, short, of course, of only Totti. He's won 2 Coppa Italias during that time, 4th most capped player for Italy. Obviously, well remembered at Roma, not quite at the Totti level, though, Gab.
No, but I mean, you are setting the bar kind of high if you start talking about Totti. This is the guy they called Captain Future because he was supposed to inherit the armband when Totti left. As it happens, Totti stuck around much longer than anybody expected, so he didn't get to have the captain's armband that long. But he's been a tremendous servant to the club. I remember, I think a lot of people do, sort of when he had the deal to go and join Roberto Mancini at Manchester City, and then he kind of did a 180 and he said, no, look, I can't leave. I would rather try to turn Roma into something approaching Manchester City than to go and join City. Interesting to see what happens next. Bear in mind, I'm just going to chuck this out there, that Daniele De Rossi speaks excellent English. His wife is half English, half American, actually. And he's also a huge fan, and I said in the past that he'd love to play in Argentina. So I think you might see links with MLS, and also he's not playing for the money at this stage. I think it would be an incredible romantic ending to the story if he rocked up at one of the Argentine giants.
He has been linked to NYCFC amongst other clubs going forward for De Rossi. How much of a gap?
Going forward? He's 30, was he 36?
No, but he's still going to play, isn't he?
He's unathletic
why are you
now.
pulling that face?
He's got injuries.
It's hardly big. I mean, I get the big news. I get it's big that he's leaving this club because he's given unbelievable service there. But quite frankly, where Daniel De Rossi is going to go now at the end of his career, right?
So what do you want me to do? Reflect on his career?
I'm just saying. We're trying to paint it as if it's big news. He's leaving Roma. He's going to go to NYCFC, or he's going to go to one of the big Argentine clubs.
I think that's worth the question, though. Has he got anything else to offer? That's where we're going.
I'm not sure he has got too much else to offer. He's a great understander of the game, reader of the game. He's played at sweeper at times. He's played in front of a back four. I loved watching him play. He's a brilliant passer of the ball. One touch. He can spread the play. But you've seen Bastian Schweinsteiger play at Chicago, and he can't run, and he can't influence the games as much as he could. I'm not sure that Daniele De Rossi will influence games in MLS. We saw Pirlo couldn't influence games because he's not athletic anymore. And that's the problem. That's why he's not playing for Roma. He's given up because he's not athletic anymore.
Yeah, if there was one club it would be NYCFC for that very reason. So I think it's Argentina or bust for me.
Of course, tomorrow sees the final of the Italian Cup. Atalanta against Lazio. Atalanta just favourites ahead of Lazio going into the final.